Please stand for the invocation.
Thanks, Pastor.
But Lord, here we are once again. And once again, we just come to you just to say thank you, thank you, thank you for this beautiful community that you've given us. And Lord, we ask you to help us not to mess it up. I thank you, Lord, that you will give wisdom, direction, guidance, and understanding to our city council. Lord, that everything that comes to mind, that it will be done according to your way and your order. Lord, thank you for strategies to excel and to bring this city to the next level that it needs to be. And Lord, let us always remember that we are blessed, 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 and as blessed, that we need to be a blessing to others around us. In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you. Pledge allegiance on 3. 1, 2. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We need to take a vote on letting Councilman
Corey participate. Got a motion?
I'll make the motion.
We have a motion
Fred
and a
made a
second.
motion.
Okay.
Second.
Roll call,
Third.
please. I don't know who made the motion. I made the motion.
Okay.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Councilmember Purdon.
Aye.
Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier.
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick.
A reluctant aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
Aye.
Councilmember Bogaz, and she has informed us of her absence. Councilmember Corey. Councilmember Corey.
Do we know if we're connected?
We'll check on that connection.
Okay.
Oh, he hasn't joined yet, okay.
And there was a motion and a second to allow Councilman Corey to participate and vote remotely. And all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, if he comes in. Okay, approval of the agenda. I don't think we have any changes to the agenda. Mayor's welcome. Hey, folks, I'm glad to see you come out on this beautiful night in Bonita. Out last night, it was fabulous at the park. Thanks for coming. We need your input to help us, to help you. Public comment. Public comment on agenda items.
This would be limited to items on the consent agenda or otherwise, not the 2 public hearing items.
Any public comment? No public comment? Okay, we'll move on to 8A, car wash lot.
This is the second reading.
Presentation.
This is the second reading of a zoning ordinance of the city of Bonita Springs to rezone portions of property located at approximately 24461 South Tamiami Trail, Bonita Springs, Florida, 34135, totaling 4.1 acres plus or minus, from the light industrial district to the general commercial district, and provide for an effective date.
Okay, this item and the next item are partially related, but because they are both quasi-judicial, I'd like to swear in any witnesses, staff, and any members of the public who intend to speak on this item. Please raise your right hand, and do you swear or affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you very
Does
much.
that include me?
No, I assume you're always telling
I
the
have to
truth.
tell the truth, okay. Okay, Mike.
Good evening, City Council. Mike Fegon with Community Development for the record, here with the next 2 cases that are before you. We'll go over this one, and I'll try and be mindful of your time tonight. This was a rezoning case for a conventional rezone, so not a planned development, not ones with loads of conditions like you're used to seeing with others. This is just a conventional rezoning from a portion of the property that's currently zoned light industrial to general commercial. It is important to note that a portion of the property is already zoned general commercial, so they're just wanting to unify the zoning across a few pieces of property here. And this also is something that went before the zoning board that they recommended approval for unanimously. So with that, so again, we just talked about the request and how the zoning board did recommend approval at their October meeting. The locations of the properties in question are on the corner of Tamiami Trail and Production Circle, which is up towards the northern portion of the city. And you can see that on this map here, you have some of the surrounding zoning classifications that are in pink here. And there is general commercial zoning directly to the south of these pieces. There's additional commercial property in the form of a commercial plan development. On the west side of 41, there's additional general commercial here, and there is some industrial here and here. This is sort of like on the borderline, if you will, of an industrial park that's at the north end of the city. And originally it was 3 lots of record in a plat known as the Bonita Industrial Park Addition. There have been some lot combinations and reconfigurations that were done, so it is just 2 properties now, but originally it was 3, so we wanted to make that clear. And in terms of the zoning, you can see here that we have the property boundaries outlined in the orangish yellow color, and the pink layers represent the zoning boundaries. And you can see how you have portions of it that are in the general commercial district, and then portions that are in the light industrial district. To the best of our knowledge, you know, the property was rezoned industrial back in 1971, so way before the city became the city. And in 1985, portions of it were again rezoned to general commercial. Why it wasn't all included, we were kind of having a hard time figuring that portion out, but it wasn't all included in the 1985 request. The best we could find out is that there was intent on the northern portion to have a car dealership. That never came to fruition. The property's been sitting vacant ever since, and nobody's done anything with it, and the zoning has been the way it's been with the two categories on the same piece of property. So again, their request is to unify the zoning for general commercial use across the entirety of the property now. So get rid of that, of the 2 different zoning districts. And as far as whether or not it would meet the requirements of the code to do so, it would. The general commercial zoning district requires that each lot be at least 100 feet wide, at least 100 feet deep, and have at least 20,000 square feet in area. As you can see, the 2 lots that we're talking about far exceed those requirements. They're over 275 feet wide each, over 350 feet deep with each of them, and they all have over 90,000 square feet in area. So they far exceed the requirements that would entitle them to a conventional rezone to the general commercial zoning district. The other thing is, I think we already talked about the surrounding properties that are already zoned in the commercial area. One of the things that I did want to put up here is that when you do a conventional zoning change, it's important to know the variable uses that could be requested as part of that zoning district. And again, many of them could have been requested already because a portion of the property is already general commercial. So it's just reaffirming what they could ask for. And the uses that are in bold on that list there are uses that would require a special exception, either because there's a specific circumstance that would require it, or because the property is located in your US 41 overlay, which requires a special exception for specific uses. So just wanted to give that info there for you.
Yeah.
As far as the comprehensive plan compliance, yes, we did a full analysis of the comprehensive plan with this request for the general commercial zoning district. We don't see any issues with it. It's in the general commercial future land use designation. So a switch to commercial zoning is compatible and seems to make sense. There are no environmental resources or sensitivities that are found on site. For the transportation element, the properties do front fully constructed roadways with suitable infrastructure for access and to support development. And the other elements of your comprehensive plan, such as schools and intergovernmental coordination and conservation, those wouldn't apply to this particular request. So with the analysis that we did for the applicable portions of the comp plan, we do not see any conflict. And with that in mind, you do have the approval criteria for conventional rezoning that is there in front of you, making sure it meets the comp plan, making sure there's no burden on your transportation or infrastructure, the availability of services in the area. Yes, there is water and sewer available to the properties. Whether or not it meets or exceeds performance or locational standards provided, consistent with the comp plan densities and intensities, it is. and compatible with uses in the surrounding area. As we showed on the previous aerial slide, this zoning district already exists on the property and already exists on neighboring properties as well, so we did not see a conflict with any of the approval criteria. So I know I went through that portion kind of fast, but staff does recommend approval to rezone the portions of those two properties from light industrial to general commercial. And again, the zoning board did look at this back in October and voted unanimously to approve. So with that, if you have any questions of me, and I think we do have a representative of the applicant participating virtually.
I also want to let you know that Councilman Corey has joined us since the beginning started. Do we have?
I make a motion to approve.
Second. Do we have any members of the public wish to speak on this rezoning item?
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
You did get a second, right?
Yes.
Good evening, yes. My name is Patrick Neal. I represent Arbor Properties, doing business as Super Suds, another car wash operator here in the area. My client really doesn't have an objection to the rezoning to the general commercial district. My client does have an objection to the special exception, so I'd like to reserve time to speak to the special exception when that comes up. The general commercial we have no issue with, but we do have an objection to the special exception. So I apologize for not having weighed in on this earlier, but we didn't get any notice of this until basically this afternoon. So.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, sir. 8B,
Any other members of the public?
public comment on this anymore?
Roll call on the,
Councilmember Purdon.
Just to clarify,
this is just the zoning.
aye.
Councilmember Carr.
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier.
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick.
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
Aye.
Councilmember Corey.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, next item is a special exception.
Number 8B.
Okay, so again, Mike Fegon with Community Development for the record, and we will go ahead and talk about the special exception request that is proposed for one of the two properties that was just subject to the rezone for a car wash use. Again, as you know, because this property is within the US 41 overlay, it does require a special exception, so they did file the necessary applications for this request. And we did put this application through its paces, as we normally do, with a full review by staff. There was planning, bike ped, environmental, surveying, engineering, architect, even FDOT took a peek at it. So we do feel comfortable with the staff recommendation that is before you today for recommendation of approval for this car wash. So what we're talking about as far as which property, it's the southern of the two properties that you just discussed as part of the rezone. It's the one here with the star. And obviously, like I said, it was just part of the rezone, and it was part of a plat that goes back to the 80s. And when you established your US 41 overlay in 2015, car washes were one of the uses that required a special exception. So that is why we are before you today. This is an aerial rendering that was provided by the applicant of a proposal of what the property could look like when it's developed. As you can see, one of the things that they did at the request of staff was orient the tunnel so that it was parallel to 41 as opposed to perpendicular, where you would potentially see the inside of the tunnel and all the guts and mechanics as you're driving by. So they also are going to be providing a relatively heavy landscape buffer along the US 41 right-of-way. They're also proposing vacuum stations that are going to be more internal to the site overall, not highly visible from the US 41 right-of-way. And back here, even though it doesn't show it, it'll show it on a future aerial I'm going to show you, is going to be a retention pond that's going to be fully landscaped with littoral plantings all the way around. The access points are going to be off of Production Circle, so there are going to be no access points or curb cuts that are going to be required off of US 41 for access to the site. So this is a site plan version of the aerial that you just saw, And a few other things that I would point out as well in compliance with your US 41 overlay is they are providing sidewalk connections. They're going to run from Production Circle out to US 41. This is a connection that does not currently exist. They're going to build it as part of the requirements of the US 41 overlay. They are also going to be providing an amenity area as part of the requirements of the overlay. There's going to be a bike rack, there's going to be a bench, a pergola, an area for respite for those who are passing by. So even though this is a very auto-centric use, one of the purposes of your overlay is to provide for multiple modes as you redevelop, so bicycles, pedestrians, what have you. And they're doing their part for those provisions, and they are showing them on the site plan. This is one of the pages of the proposed landscape plan, and we just wanted to show this to council so that you can get a feel for where the landscaping could potentially go. So essentially all the circles that you see here are proposals for trees and bushes, and they are meeting the requirements that they are supposed to meet as part of the Development Services Chapter 3 of the Land Development Code. They are not requesting any deviations or variances from the landscape code, so it will be landscaped according to code. We also have some line of sight exhibits that we asked the applicant to provide us. While it's not an outright requirement of the application, we thought this additional information was going to be helpful to get a better feel from what the visual impact could be from US 41, the north side of Production Boulevard and south near Production Circle. So this is just a snapshot of some of the line of sight exhibits. The full scope of the exhibits are in your packet, and they aren't available on the website as well for your review. Similar to what we do with the rezonings, we review these requests for consistencies with the comprehensive plan. As we talked about in the previous case, this is in a property that's in the general commercial future land use category. The request is commercial in nature. We didn't see an issue with consistency or compatibility with that portion of the comp plan. For traffic, we did have them provide a traffic impact statement that provided the proposed traffic impacts on the surrounding roadway networks. It was deemed a project of not significant impact, meaning that the total trips generated by this business would be 2% or less of the surrounding roadway capacity. It also fronts fully constructed roadways, as we already discussed. The access points are going to be off of Production Circle. We discussed how they're going to be providing for sidewalks and bicyclists as well. So we do feel that they are meeting the traffic element of the comprehensive plan. And again, as we discussed previously, the other elements that are in the comp plan for schools and conservation and things like that don't apply to this particular case. So the relevant sections that do apply were reviewed by staff, and this request was found to be consistent with those sections. So when it comes to the criteria for the US 41 overlay, there are 10 criteria that are in your code, and we'll go ahead and we'll go through each of these one by one and the staff analysis that was provided for these. So with the first one is, will it be consistent with existing or planned uses of, oh, sorry, these are the rest of them. I forgot I put them in 2 slides, or else they would have been too small to read. Sorry, those are the rest of them. So we're going to go through each of them now, all 10. So the first one is consistency with the intent of the overlay district, protecting and enhancing view sheds from US 41 and other public roadways. So when it comes to that, you know, we discussed previously and showed on the previous slide the landscape plan that they're proposing to provide an adequate buffer from the bulk of the car wash facility on US 41. So much of the facility, once the landscaping matures, won't be visible from US 41 overall. They are going to meet their required planting requirements in terms of width, the types of trees, the required heights. They're not requesting any deviations from all of those, so you know they're going to have to meet that code as part of their development order process. As far as the next criteria, it has to do with building and site design standards and whether or not they are using innovative techniques to address potential visual impacts. One of the things that we worked with them on, again, was making sure that they were positioning the tunnel so that it was parallel to US 41 and not perpendicular, so that you can't really see what's going on inside, all the guts, the soap, everything like that. Tying into that, you have the vacuum area, which is more centralized on the site, won't be visible from US 41. So those were some of the techniques that they had utilized to deal with that aspect of it. Your third criteria, sorry, go too fast. Your third criteria has to do with whether or not there's a balance between auto-oriented design and pedestrian access. So again, even though it's a car wash, which is auto-oriented by nature, they are providing those sidewalk connections that don't exist currently. They are going to be providing the amenity zone, the bike rack, the bench, the pergola. So they are meeting the requirements of that particular criteria. Your next two criteria, 4 and 5. 4 has to do with whether or not there are exceptional or extraordinary conditions and a separation of at least 500 feet or more, and also whether or not there's demonstrated market demand for the use. So the closest car wash is on the opposite side of 41. It's about 800 feet away, give or take. The closest car wash on the same side of US 41 that's on US 41 and has 41 frontage is about 4 miles to the south. So it does exceed the 500-foot criteria that you have in your code as far as separation from a similar use. And as far as market demand, one of the things that the applicant touched on, which is an engineering firm, is the increase in applications that they've had to deal with as an engineering firm of requests for car washes. And similarly, the city's been in a similar position. For an example, in 2020 and 2021, there were no special exceptions for car washes that came before you. But just in this last year, we've had 4 of them. So there has been an uptick in this request, which is likely a response to demand for these uses. So we feel comfortable that the market demand is there for a particular use like this. Your 5th criteria is whether or not the project would be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to the public welfare. It's on property that's zoned commercial. It's in a commercial corridor. The nearest residential property is to the east, which is buffered by another industrial piece of property, not this piece. And again, with the appropriate buffering, the fact that they're going to be governed by the noise control ordinance, so on and so forth, we don't see any potential injury occurring from a car wash like this. Your next criteria has to do with whether or not the use is compatible with existing or planned uses. Again, not to sound like a broken record, it's a commercial use that's in a commercial corridor and with a commercial future land use category. So it is compatible. It is surrounded by commercial or industrial property on all sides. Your 7th criteria is, will it cause damage, hazard, or nuisance to persons or property? So one of the things that we look at with that as staff is you actually have a list of uses that are required to be certain distances away from residential areas. And that's because they do have the potential to be noisy or obnoxious or a potential nuisance. Car washes are not on that list, so they do not require a special setback from residential areas in order for them to be developed. And again, that with the fact that they're going to be providing buffering, screening, they're going to be providing their own stormwater treatment. There's going to be a pond on site for that, actually. The bike ped compliance, cross access to a neighboring property. It is the staff opinion that they've done what they're supposed to do to meet the intent of that criteria. The 8th criteria has to do with if there's protections in place for critical areas and natural resources. There are none on site. That was confirmed by our senior environmental specialist who went out and walked the site as well. And there was an environmental report that was done for staff to review. So there are no environmentally critical areas or natural resources on site. So no conflict with that criteria either. And then your final 2 criteria, criteria 9 is consistency with the comprehensive plan. And as we stated actually in a previous slide, it's in the general commercial future land use category. It's commercial in nature, no conflict there. And your 10th criteria is whether or not the request would be in compliance with the zoning provisions, supplemental regulations, and performance standards found in your code. They are not requesting deviations or variances from any of these sections. So they're going to be building it by the book, by the code as required. They are simply here to get the use approved because that is what is required of them as part of the special exception process, which again, just furthers their compliance with the LDC because that's what they were supposed to do. So we do feel that the request meets that criteria. So with that in mind, staff is recommending approval of the request, just like the zoning board did back in the October meeting. Some conditions that staff wants to put in place that has been agreed upon with the applicant is making this valid for this applicant only, and that the development needs to be generally consistent with that site plan and landscape plan and the architectural renderings that are in your packet. Criteria number 2 is that the noise ordinance remains in full force and effect, and that they are to be aware of that. The third condition would be that making sure they understand that any changes might require additional approvals, so it's a rather narrowly scoped approval that we would be giving them. The fourth condition is understanding that approval of this special exception does not guarantee approval of an engineering permit or a building permit. So this is just the zoning approval. This doesn't circumvent the other steps that they would have to go through before they can develop. And the fifth criteria is that unless modified by this approval, the project needs to be consistent with the requirements of the US 41 overlay and the remainder of the land development code. And again, all these criteria and conditions were agreed to by the applicant. So because of that, we do feel comfortable recommending approval of this request. If you have any questions of me or of the applicant, we're here for you. Yes, sir.
This pond, that's not for runoff from the wash?
It's not runoff for the wash. It's meant to be stormwater treatment. There's gonna be different provisions, and they're gonna work with BSU on this for the runoff from the car wash itself and making sure that the chemicals are removed and treated before it goes into the system.
Another question, why are we deciding where a business can go in this community?
So it has less to do with the business itself and more to do with its function. Back in 2015, when you created the US 41 overlay, one of the thoughts at the time, one of the reasons why you created it was part of a larger effort to make the city more pedestrian friendly, more walkable, more bikeable, and to make sure that as development starts to occur, that these items are taken into account. So when you look at the list of uses in US 41 that require a special exception, most of them are auto-oriented, and it's meant to make sure that in addition to doing those things, that you do make provisions for these other areas, for the bikes, the pedestrians, things like that. So that's what the brunt of the special exception criteria is based on for the US 41 overlay.
I'm talking about the 500 feet.
The 500 feet? That was a separation distance that was proposed back in 2015 as, I don't have the full details of it. John, do you know why that 500 foot specifically was chosen? Oh, okay, yeah, that's right, market saturation, I do remember that now, yeah. So the thought at the time was you didn't want to run into a situation where you're going to have the same use in succession going down the line. So you wanted to avoid having fast food row or car wash row or drive-through row, you know, where each of these uses was just in succession down the line. So it allowed for a mix of uses to be developed on the properties.
Yes, Nigel.
Hey, Mike, good to see you.
Sir.
The letter that we received, I assume this is the same Mr. Neal that sent us. Thank you. So when we examined this, you really weren't looking at the type of business. We're just looking at the impact of that business on the parcel.
Correct.
Okay, so my second question is, I get my car washes mixed up, so I apologize, and I use both of them, so very politically correct, right? Super Suds is the one that's just south of the
South of
Bud Gulf,
South of Bonita Beach Road, out in front of Springs Plaza, off of US 41.
and Bonita Bubbles is the one that's up north.
Bonita Bubbles is the one that's closest to this one. It's up north towards the north end of the property. It's on the opposite side of US 41 as this one. It's about 800 feet away.
Okay, so I guess what I'm not understanding is the letter said that Super Suds was less than half a mile from this new site.
Yeah, I'm a little confused by that as well, so I'm yeah.
So the actual, it's
It's 4 miles away from
4
them.
miles, okay, thank you. I actually read your letter.
Can I ask a question, Mike?
Yes, sir.
There's another car wash at the north end of the public plaza, north of the intersection of 41 and 041. How far away is that from the location of this proposed car wash?
Just over
So
500 feet.
So there's two car washes on the east side of 41.
Correct, on the opposite side of 41, correct.
Right. Okay. So the location of that car wash does not impact the analysis?
No, sir. Your standard in the code is 500 feet. And the other thing I would keep in mind is the function of the car washes themselves, whether it's full service or a self-service or just a tunnel that's attached to a gas station. You do have certain varieties in the area. The closest one that is most comparable to this could potentially be Bonita Bubbles, but they also provide additional services that this car wash is not going to be providing. So the closest one that would be in comparison to what this car wash is providing could potentially be Super Suds, which again is 4 miles to the south.
But this one has a separate building to house the vacuuming. So
Correct.
is this a situation where you would drive into this facility and someone would put your car through the tunnel and then drive it over and vacuum it for you? Or is this a self-service kind of place, just like the gas station one at the north end of the public shopping center?
I'm gonna let I believe we have Craig Brousseau on the line with is the engineer for the applicant. I'll let him answer that, but my understanding is that there's a bit of both components into this, because there are gonna be on-site employees that are gonna be available to help and make sure that the site functions appropriately. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Craig, you do have the ability to go through the tunnel on your own and do your own vacuuming, or you can get assistance.
Yeah, the customers will drive their own car through the tunnel and then go around to do the vacuuming themselves. And the employees are there to assist with like spraying the bugs off the front of the car and assisting with the pay machines and anything that somebody might need around the vacuums, resupplying towels and such.
Mr. Mayor, Mike, there's a section where you're gonna redo the traffic study?
No, we're not going to redo the traffic study, but when they come in for a development order, they're required to provide another traffic study.
Okay.
You're gonna have people to make change and give quarters, I would assume you're gonna have somebody there to make change, so is it coin operated or I don't know.
I can let Craig answer that. We didn't get into the actual business model. It's more about the function of the site that we were looking at.
I think they only accept credit cards, or can you put dollar bills in the machine?
No.
I'm not sure. My experience with these new types of car washes is they're all credit card based.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I
Yes, Fred,
make a motion to approve.
second. Public comment before we vote?
Yes, please. Again, for the record, Patrick Neal representing Super Suds. As you correctly point out, Super Suds is not the one that's immediately adjacent to this. There's another one up there. But this is more of an argument in principle that I think the council should consider, and I appreciate your time this evening. There's two criteria here that I think the city looked at that may not abide with what industry standards are. The separation, as in your code, is 500 feet. That's what we've just heard, correct? Well, and that was to prevent market saturation. Well, I've done a little bit of research in the International Car Wash Association. Yes, there is an International Car Wash Association. Did put forth that the criteria for separation between car washes, particularly in urban areas, should be at least 2 miles, not 500 feet. That's what the association that is of the industry says should be the separation between car washes in order to prevent the exact thing you were talking about, market saturation. So I think that's a criteria that the council ought to at least consider in their evaluation of this. The other thing is that they mentioned that the demand is strong for car washes here. Well, we don't know why that's happened, but I think we know why there weren't a lot of applications in 20 and 21. There was something going on in 2020 and 21 that pretty much damped down most construction. So I think that was, an item that, I don't know whether that data has any relevance to what's going on today. So that's where we're talking about. Again, we're talking about compatibility, and I believe that, based upon the International Car Wash Association data, that it's not really compatible being that close to another car wash. So I'd suggest that's something that the council consider as going forward in evaluating this request. Aside from that, those are really the primary issues that we have as an objection to the special exception. As I said, we didn't have an objection to the actual rezone, because I think converting it from light industrial to general commercial is a rational thing to do in that area, because it's primarily commercial in that area, I believe. So that's our position, and I would hope that the council would consider our position in evaluating this and other future applications for car washes.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions?
Am I allowed to ask questions? Yes.
Well, you're first, you're the mayor.
Yes, sir.
Well, the car wash in the north of Bonita Bubbles, I think it's called, they do oil changes also. You're not doing oil changes and stuff like that.
No. Ms. Moran, no. Super Suds is just Super Suds.
Yeah, good.
They do car washes and detailing.
Nigel?
And you've got no relationship with Bonita Bubbles.
No.
I think,
I think I may have had my car washed there once. Yeah.
I guess my comment is, you're representing someone who's 4 miles away, who's opposed to it, but the people that are 500 or 600 feet away,
They aren't here.
they're not here. And I don't want to see 2 empty car washes in 3 or 4 years, because they all compete each other. But we're not here to regulate business.
Understood. And my client's concern is more broad-based, that, with the proliferation of car washes, is that it could damage the businesses. So that's really the concern.
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, first of all, we can't change the 500 feet at this point, but I do think that community development ought to look into this, what you brought up, the 2-mile separations, and maybe we need to add that in or change it.
I'd be happy to work with staff and do.
Yeah, but I don't see how you can do it on the fly. So I'm still gonna vote for it, but I think we ought to look into this.
No disagreement.
Yep.
As I say, I'm more than happy to work with staff. But thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Ready for a vote? Any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Please come forward.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. I've never been to one of these, so I don't have anything prepared, but
Give us your name real quick.
oh, my name's Rachel Brown. I live here in Bonita, and I did Google car washes in the area, and it seems like there's quite a few, and I don't see the need for another car wash. So that's just my opinion. I also don't have a car, and I know that a lot of people in Bonita live here because of its walkability and bikeability, and I just don't see the service, the overall service that this provides to the community to make it a better, more livable community. I see it as something that we already have and don't really need another one.
Well, thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
In my opinion, I'm a free enterprise person, and I don't think we should be regulating where businesses go. But that's my opinion. I'm not government. So we call for a vote. Ready for a vote?
Councilmember Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier,
Aye.
Councilmember Folick,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes,
Aye.
Councilmember Purdon, Councilmember Corey,
No.
Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, 9, there we go. That's consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second?
We have a second. And roll call, please.
Mayor Steinmeier,
Aye.
Councilmember Fullick,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes,
Aye.
Councilmember Purdon,
Aye.
Councilmember Carr,
Aye.
Councilmember Corey,
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, any comments about what we just passed? I guess not. City council members' reports. Let's start with
Oh.
Jesse.
Wait. Mayor, I'm sorry, this should have been deleted. We didn't have any green sheets or agenda items that were submitted by council members. The reports would be at the end. So this is official business of the council, and so in the future, we'll make sure that that's omitted from the agenda.
That's good. I don't understand that. Okay. City attorney's report.
Mr. Mayor, the item I have on the agenda is to approve a purchase and sale agreement for a property identified as parcel 206. This is part of our efforts to acquire the necessary right-of-way up Bonita Grand Drive up to the future city park. As you recall from our last meeting when we had this discussion, we sent out notices to all the property owners offering them to acquire their property before we filed suit for any eminent domain. Our eminent domain council has received some interest from some of those property owners. This is one of those property owners. The reimbursement for this cost will be coming from BG Mine as part of our settlement agreement with them. So I'm asking for your approval of this agreement. It's a voluntary acquisition.
So move.
Second.
Question, this does not affect the property rights of the people.
No, our code provides that if you lose some of your property as a result of an eminent domain action or even the threat of eminent domain, that you reserve all your rights. So setbacks, density calculations, all that would still be allowed, they'd still be allowed to develop as previously intended.
We have more property to.
As my understanding, we're working with 2 or 3 other property owners who are interested in the voluntary sales. We are also, I've approved, and they're up for consideration with Lee County School Boards in Lee County to get donation of their properties along the right-of-way. And then there's just a handful of other larger tracts that probably have a little more consideration they want to look at. But things are moving along.
Any other comments? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Fullick,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Forbes,
Aye.
Councilmember Purdon, Councilmember Carr,
Aye.
Mayor Steinmeier,
Aye.
Councilmember Corey.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much. If you may receive phone calls because we have initiated some of the lawsuits on some properties where we couldn't negotiate or we haven't responded. Let me know if you have any questions about that, but generally we're filing the actions to get the process started. So we may have some people that haven't had a chance to read the offer letters. And so if you get calls or questions, feel free to pass them on to me.
Mr. Mayor, could I ask a question on that?
Yes.
Could you just clarify for the general public how the price point is set up for the offer letter so that people can kind of understand how that process works?
Right, so the process will be an appraiser. We have an appraiser who's given an appraisal on the square footage taken. In some cases, that valuation may be based on comps. In other cases, if there's more impact to existing facilities, like a commercial facility, maybe if they lost parking spaces, if there were drainage or other improvements that have to be covered, the offer letter is intended to make the property whole. And under Florida law, we are required in eminent domain to make the property owner completely whole for any losses they receive. Generally, the initial offer letters tend to be a little bit higher than everyone expects to get out of the litigation, because that's where we're trying to avoid those unnecessary costs. So we expect that for the most part, a lot of these property owners, some of them have been represented by counsel. Once they understand what's happening, they're generally in favor and working it out. Because at the end of the day, even though we're not building a complete roadway the entire length, some portions will be, and other places will be complete street that the city builds as well. So it's going to be a benefit to their property as well.
And this is being reimbursed by Bonita Mines?
Correct. So under our settlement agreement with Bonita Grand Mine, in which we obtained some park space up near the Larry Kiker Preserve at the northern end of the largest lake, we require that they provide us access to that, because there is an access easement, but it was not one that the public could transverse. So as part of those deals, they had started to acquire the property, and then any properties that they could not acquire, if we had to use eminent domain to get access to our property, they're required to reimburse us all of the costs, legal costs, appraisal costs, engineering design. So, and that's
And
moving
then
forward.
we pay for the road.
They'll be paying for the road. They're essentially putting the money into escrow. The road beyond their entrance, we will pay for. Although I have a meeting set up with Lee County, we have had some indication that Lee County may be willing to participate, because it would grant them access to Larry Kiker Preserve as well.
Good news.
Yes, Nigel.
Derek, just if you would, for the public, say, whenever you hear the words condemnation and acquisition, the appraisers are not employees of the city of Bonita Springs. They are state-certified, independent Florida licensed appraisers. So
Correct.
we have no influence over the value that they get.
And at the end of the day, during an eminent domain proceeding, if the property owner hires an attorney, generally they'll get approached by law firms just on the filing of the legal action. Those law firms will do it on contingency. So they'll represent them through the process, get their own appraisers in there. If at the end of the day, they would receive $1 more, the courts determined they would receive $1 more than what we initially offered them, they'll get that money plus their attorney's fees. So the system is set up not to allow the local governments to steamroll people on.
Thanks, Derek.
You can vote on that?
We already voted?
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, here we go. Is this city manager's report? Dr. Banyan?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. At this time, I would ask that Dr. Margaret Banyan come forward, and she's going to provide a presentation on the state-required amendments to the city's comprehensive plan, as well as potential optional amendments that we may wish to pursue in review of the evaluation and appraisal review report that we completed last spring.
Hey, good to see you, doctor.
Hi.
Yeah, you lost your tan.
Someone else said that to me. Gonna have to go get a tan next time.
Yeah, we good.
I do have a presentation, but it's not up, so I'm not sure
Antonio, we need help.
how to make that happen. Oh, yes, there we go. All right, thank you. So I really have a relatively short presentation for you tonight. And part of the goal is to help inform the public about what's happening. So thank you for allowing me to kind of double up. Some of this may be review for council. So really, this is just kind of a reminder about where we are with the planning process. So as many of you recall, we engaged in the evaluation and appraisal review last year. And that we completed in March 2023. You completed it early before the deadline. So we didn't want to walk the plank with, our state land planning agency. So we did complete that early. But the ear-based amendments, then, what that means is that's going to be due April 1st, 2024. So there's three components to what the evaluation and appraisal review did. The first was we went through the entire comp plan and looked at each policy, and we had three kind of categories. One was no comment, and our standard was really around is this policy, is this goal or objective meeting the city's vision and meeting the city's needs? So no comment, the policy or objective or goal was in fairly good shape. And then the second bucket was whether it was required by the state So as the state amends its legislative efforts, and as it amends state law, your plan has to be consistent. So that was the second bucket. That's what really has the April 1st, 2024 deadline. So any amendments to be consistent with state law have to be done by then. And then the third piece was anything optional. So looking at any goals, objectives, policies that when we're engaging in the process, any of those that could be sufficient or insufficient right now to meet the city's goals. So there's no deadline with those, but there is some efficiency that's saved when you're conducting public meetings or working with council about what those amendments could be. So that process there, when we kind of looked at all of the areas that could or should be worked on, we made the decision to address the state required amendments, which you have to do, and then look at addressing high priority goals, objectives, and policy. I'll talk a little bit about what we mean by high priority in a minute. And then the third piece is doing some plan cleanup, and I'll also talk about what that means. All right, so state required amendments, just a few highlights. There's a few things that we're working on that are going to be important discussion items. The first, the state changed their the legislation that cities and counties that had agricultural land use needed to incorporate solar facilities. There's a question about how we define that, so we're working through that process. And then the second area, the significant area, is around floating solar facilities. And floating solar facilities, I get this question all the time. What's a floating solar facility? Well, it's one that floats. Highly technical, one that floats.
Lake or something.
So yeah, it's solar facilities that are placed on water. And so the legislation there talks about that floating solar facilities need to be in appropriate land use categories. The question is, what's appropriate? And so we've been working on some analysis, looking at what some other cities have done to look to see how they've defined what's appropriate. So you're going to be faced with that question about what's appropriate, and we'll provide analysis around that so that we can have a conversation about what that's going to mean.
Can I ask
And-
a question, sir?
Yes.
When you say,
Can you wait?
well, we're right here.
If this is about, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, state required, is the state gonna reimburse us or pay for it, or they're just telling us to do it and we have to pay for it?
Well, let's see. We could talk about unfunded state mandates, probably in a different conversation, but yes, so anytime there's new legislation that impacts comp plan, yes, city and counties have to follow that, and do the work, right, to decide how it's appropriate and how the city or county is going to follow that.
Thank you.
So, yes. As far as I know, there's no funding for that. Someone else may know.
Knowing that there's no funding for it, what are the requirements from our, because, okay, so it's not an issue necessarily with solar, it's more of the shoehorning of land use regulations into local statute, which I object to. What are we required to do, and what does that look like if we are not compliant in that?
So you have to be compliant with state law, and I would say at the same time, the way that particular statute is written requires you to define what's appropriate.
So
the work
out for the cities is defining what's appropriate, because I mean, there's no point in having a solar argument at this juncture. But I mean, the reality is there's a number of issues with solar, from the fact that, I mean, It's mined from, Chinese, by slaves. First of all, it's mined by slaves. That's an issue. Additionally, the technology on an annual basis gets more advanced and less useful, and then the physical product of the actual panels themselves are leaching harmful chemicals back into the environment, creating other environmental issues. So it's like it's a feel-good thing that they're trying to force down our throat without an actual mechanism for us to do it. And then they're saying, hey, we're making the cities do solar. But then there's nothing that we actually are required to do. So it's like the exercise, it seems like a silly exercise that's kind of forced on us by the state, honestly.
So I think the exercise of defining what's appropriate still can have some value, and in terms of sort of responsibly looking into that statute, that's something that the city just needs to do.
Okay, well, I don't know if we're in the question and answer period in there. Are we in the question and answer, or we just?
We will have, and so let's move on past this. Yeah, so the other piece that we recognized in the state required amendments is that the definitions are we're gonna have to update some definitions, because again, statute has changed, there's some changing definitions, those will need to be updated. There's not a lot in that state required bucket in terms of policies to look at, but they are gonna require some thinking and some discussion about which direction council wants to go in. And then I told you we were gonna look at some of the higher priority goals, objectives, policies. Those are gonna be around sort of two big things. One is amending those to better accomplish the city's goals. So one example would be protecting neighborhoods by ensuring street character is maintained. There's a couple streets that we want to look at, that there's some strategies to protect those streets. So that's an example. And then the other example, higher priority goals, objectives, policies, is clarifying processes for public participation, just to make a lot of the participation process very clear. So I think one of the goals around that is to ensure as many voices come into the city as possible. And so the young lady, thank you for talking about the car wash, right? That's a really good example about how we can engage larger members of the community when we have very clear processes. So we're not talking about taking anything away or changing anything, to just really clarify what the process is. So those are the kind of higher priority goals.
As well as consistency. We want to make sure that we're consistent with other identified processes, and that was one thing we noted.
Yes, yeah. And so speaking of inconsistencies, that's the third bucket of plan cleanup. Thank you, Arlene. And so there's 4 things that we really noticed in that plan cleanup, is that there's several inconsistencies currently in the comp plan. One of those is around the public participation element that's out of sync with what statute says, is out of sync with your processes as well. The other thing that we notice as an example is that you've got a couple different versions of a level of service in different parts of your comp plan related to potable water. So that's an inconsistency that needs to be cleaned up. There's a few of those scattered throughout. And then the second area is around goals, objectives, policies that are no longer consistent with the city's practice. So there's some in housing, there's some kind of scattered all throughout the comp plan that are like that. And then the third area is around goals, objectives, policies that refer to completed action. So when the comp plan was written, there was a lot of the city will. And so a lot of those policies right now, the city already has completed those policies. So we really need to look at making sure that the city gets credit for what it has done. And then the fourth area is around outdated information and document titles. So, for example, in the conservation element, because it's pretty long, it's hard to catch all of those things. There's some titles, for example, the conservation policy, it should refer to evacuation zones and routes rather than storm category. So those are the kinds of things that have just hung on that hadn't been updated, that now's a good time. Yes.
On that one, we discussed when we got together the complete streets component, the ability for developers to pay in lieu of on complete streets projects. And I commented on how, council will get mad when Habitat for Humanity or somebody comes and then they try to take advantage of that, but it's in our own code. So my thought was, if we don't like it there, we need to get rid of it within our own code, and then the issue's gone, and then we have complete streets, and nobody can be mad at anybody for taking advantage of it as we have it written. Is that the type of thing that is going to be covered under this portion?
So that sounds like that's in the land development code.
Okay.
And if that's in the code, no.
Okay.
So this is comp plan, this is the comp plan.
But at a higher level, what you could do is enforce the fact that the ultimate goal is to create the infrastructure. So is to not, you can strengthen the goals, objectives, and policies to that end, and then it's delivered through the technical portion through the land development code. So by strengthening the goals, objectives, and policies, you then amend the land development code to state that that's no longer an option.
And for example, what
Can we move along here?
what we had Tidal
Wait a minute.
Tidal Wave Car Wash do was to create sidewalks and to create a bike resting place and a covered space for people, that kind of thing.
And
That creates the
and my thing is that we allow in our own zoning for them. They can pay extra money and then they get to skip out of that. I'm saying if we take rid of that.
Aren't we out of order here?
No, this is part of the discussion. This is exactly what we're supposed to be talking about.
She's had a question and answer at the end of her presentation.
Right. That is not what we're.
She's not at the end of her presentation yet.
I understand that. What I need is clarification before she goes forward to ensure that we appropriately understand and nothing gets lost, because this is very important. But I appreciate it. I'm ready if you'd like to continue, though.
I have one more slide. And that's just to share with you kind of where we're at, what you can see coming up in the process. So today we did drop-in sessions, an update with council, and then we're moving forward with additional public meetings. So January 2024, we'll have another public meeting, and then March 2024, another public meeting. We're also adding in some drop-in sessions, again, for members of the public, just to make sure, because some of this can be complicated, so we want to add some additional drop-in sessions. I'll be here in person again in March, and so it's a good opportunity to do that. In the LPA hearing, we planned for February 2024, and the council, the next time you'll see me would be at the council transmittal hearing, and that'll be March 2024. So we kind of have things staggered up to that March 2024 adoption so that we meet the April 1 deadline. And then, so that'll be the transmittal in March, and then we send that material up to the state land planning agency, and they have 30 days to do their review. So we say planned, council adoption is planned for April/May 2024, because we don't know how long it's going to take when you get it back for us to do the response before we can bring it back to council. So we want to create some flexibility. But that's generally the timeline for what you can expect to see next. And that is the end of my presentation. So,
Okay, how do you ensure the street character? What the heck is a street character?
yeah, in terms of the comment, so that's how to sort of ensure that neighborhoods are protected by doing the best you can to keep the character of the street.
What
So
is the
there's
character of a street?
Oh, so maybe a street that's walkable or bikeable. The feel and character, the flow of the street.
There's different
Okay.
engineered elements that could be placed on the street. For example, there's landscaping, there's narrow width of lanes so that can help work towards, controlling speed, crosswalks. So depending on the adjacent
If
neighborhoods.
it wants to endure it, that means you can't change it, to my mind. I mean, you can't improve it. That's what it's saying, to endure the character. It means you don't have a landscape.
I think it means to ensure the character, sir. So what it would be was, when you make plans in your capital improvement projects, you could look at existing roadways or new roadways to ensure that those type of engineered elements could be added to that roadway to make it a little bit safer, slower traffic movement, roundabouts, crosswalks.
I can give you,
That's Matt.
if you were looking, say you had a 2-lane road that was a little local street that people walked down and had all the elements Arlene was talking about, and you wanted to widen it. Well, if you widen it, the easiest way to widen something may be to just ignore all the landscaping and make it just add pavement. What Dr. Banyan is talking about is you would protect the idea that if you widened it, you would incorporate all the things like landscaping and roundabouts so that it still felt like a local street. So that would be the character.
Okay, between now and April, what if the state changes some of their rules?
Then you would have to deal with them 7 years from now.
So because, every year the state comes up with new rules and regulations. So we're in the past now.
Exactly, yes.
So Mayor, that is part of the evaluation and appraisal review, which you already completed last spring. So you have a period of time that the city then has to respond to all of those changes from your last year to your future year. That's when we would be held responsible for those changes.
Okay, thank you. Any
So
other
your
questions?
next year would be 2030.
20, yeah.
Any other questions? Yes,
Just
Mr.
one, Dr. Banyan. In your opinion, are we on pace, slightly behind pace, or ahead of pace as a council, as a city? For being prepared
Not as a city.
for March,
Give me
April.
more specific. Give me more specific.
For March, April.
Oh, yes, this is all very doable. Yeah, so you're on pace.
Okay.
Yeah, there's I don't have any concerns about being able to facilitate some of those bigger decisions within that time frame. And especially because there's other, some of the definitions about what's appropriate. There's other examples that you have in the state that we can lean on. So I'm pretty comfortable. And some of the cleanup stuff is it's just a matter of going in and cleaning up. So it's not we're not really waiting on anybody to do that.
No concerns.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, move along.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Great
Thank you.
presentation.
Good to see you.
Thank you. At this time, we'll have an update on our preliminary 2022-2023 fiscal year and the financial report. On cue.
There we go.
So before we get started, I did want to stress that these are our preliminary numbers, and they're preliminary because we're still drafting our audit, and we're still making some minor adjustments here and there in order to comply with our accounting rules and regulations to prepare for our audit. So that being said, we wanted to present to you our preliminary financial report for our fiscal year that ended September 30th. Wanted to highlight some of the pertinent information that was provided when the Florida just recently did its long-range financial outlook. And it was provided by the Office of Economic and Demographic Research. You guys hear me all the time. We rely heavily on the state economist to give us indicators for a lot of our major revenues are collected at the state level, and they really do an outstanding job of just monitoring everything and all the different indicators that impact our financial collections. Florida's economy expanded 3% in the last fiscal year. During July to September of 2023, Florida's economic growth rate was 3.5%, which was ranked number 11th in the nation, and while the nation's growth rate was 2%. Good news, the state's economy is anticipated to grow 2.5%, 1.7, and then 2.4 over the next few fiscal years. What we should take away from this slide is, once again, the state is indicating that in the near term, they don't see the growth that we've experienced in the last fiscal year. And again, we've followed their lead. We've incorporated their estimates in our budget. So our next budget is all in line with this. But I'm going to give you some good news, and that's why I want to make sure we temper that. And it may not be that good. It may not be good all the time, and this is what we're basing it on. Florida's personal income growth, another indicator that they track, it grew by 7.8% last fiscal year. Again, during July to September 2023, Florida's personal income rate growth rate was 4.7, and it was ranked 14th in the nation. That's out of all the different states, while the nation's growth rate was only 4.3. Again, we've been outpacing the national data in a lot of other states in a lot of these areas. Last bullet point, the state's personal income is anticipated to grow 5.6, 5.9, and 4.2 over the next few fiscal years. Again, a little bit of a slowing down, if you will. Florida is currently the third most populous state behind California and Texas. In the 3 years since the 2020 census, Florida's had its strongest migrational trends. They've continued. It's amazing. This last bullet point talks in detail about that. The first 2 fiscal years since the 2020 census, our population has gained about 700,000 in new residents. Despite the fact that there are losses in there for the natural increase. We've talked about this a couple times. It's not a very positive thing to note, but it does weigh heavily on our population projections. For the last few years, Florida's deaths have outpaced the births. And that just means it affects a little bit how we operate and how they make economic predictions. For 2023, Florida's population growth is expected to be about 1.6%. Again, look at what it was before. So again, it's slowing down somewhat. And then over the next 7 years, they're projecting it's going to grow on average of 1.27. Still, historically, that's a good, healthy growth rate for the state. Because then you compare it to the national average, and it's much less than 1%. The baby boomers. 65% of baby boomers are now eligible for retirement. The population aged 65 and over, and again we're talking about the state, is forecasted to represent 24% of our total population by 2030, compared to 21% in 2020 and 17% in 2010. This means that last bullet point, the population growth for 60 and over is expected to increase 52% in 10 years. What this means to our population, and again, where we look at it as, from our economic standpoint, our revenue projections, our revenue collections, people who are in retirement 60 years and older, they behave economically different than someone who is actively in the labor market. So the predictions around that growth in our population, they're actually going to be, they're outpacing the younger workers from a Florida population standpoint. In 2000, you guys have heard me talk about the new indicator that the state added, Florida's prime working age population. And again, if the state ever adds an indicator to track something, that means it needs attention. The ages are 25 to 54. It represents 43% of the population. But with the aging baby boomers and our prediction that they're going to move into the state, that's going to go down. As we hear that some of the, in my opinion, as we hear that some of the labor force nationally is kind of easing, I think this is warning the state of Florida that we're not going to behave like we do in some other areas, like the nation. Again, we'll just watch it, and again, the state does a great job at predicting all this and pulling all these factors together to give us some idea of where we're headed from our revenue standpoint. Single-family permitting. The activity has declined 10% in 2022, and that 2022 was mentioned because it's the first time the indicator was negative since 2009. We know we talk about it, and we're going to cover those revenues are local here and how we've seen those decline. But Florida expects the single-family new construction starts to decline, and this is 24%. They think this year that we're wrapping up, still decline 3% next year, and then thereafter, they think it will resume regular growth rate. Florida inflation does not appear to be falling as quickly as the rest of the nation. I'm sure you all have probably heard that. Consumer inflation in Florida is the highest that it's been in decades. And again, if you hear about from what they're saying, the economists are saying when you hear about it easing at the national level, our state inflation hasn't eased to the same level. And the way I like to think about it is our highs seem to be higher than the nation. And in this instance, kind of some cautionary details about inflation tend to be a little more than the nation as well. There has been, it was noted in this report, these are some notes that I thought were important to us. There's been a rapid decline in personal saving rates. It's been noted over the last year. And again, this has to do with the way consumers spend in our state, which again impacts our revenues. It's been noted that there's an elevated use of credit over the last few months, and that strong inflationary pressures continue to exist on households. Nothing new, but when we look at our whole picture, it's a good thing to remind ourselves of these things. This slide kind of pulls it all together from the challenges that the state face. When they're combining their economic outlooks, they're combining revenue collections that have continued to exceed expectations, but at the same time, they're dealing with the economic conditions of the higher inflation, and it just makes their near-term economic conditions so a little more difficult to predict, if you will. So we're going to get to the city's financial section of the report. This is our general fund revenue. It's by our fiscal year. These numbers are pretty good. The expenses we're still doing some adjustments on, but this pie is for 12 months ending September 30th. It's remarkable. This pie shape is very close to what we have in the budget, with a few exceptions that we're going to talk about. As we've been talking each month, because we accumulate funds to pay as you go for our capital improvement project, we tend to have a lot of funds invested in earning interest. So our interest income has gone up over time, just like everyone else's has. So that was a little bit difficult to predict, and we don't really want to count on that, because if something happens and it goes down, we don't want to use it to pay our bills. So general fund revenue. This is fiscal year to date, current year and prior year. And as you can see there, all the positive economic things we've noted on the prior slides. We're coming in higher than we had in the prior year for most of these categories because of the positive economic conditions. General fund revenue budget comparisons, again 12 months. The note here, as a result of the continued positive economic trends, the following revenue categories exceeded the budget amounts in the state. Great news, but again, we've budgeted for the increase to not be in line with the state, not to be as much this next year. So just a cautionary that we don't anticipate these levels of budget overages to, and that's a positive thing, because we're talking about revenue, to continue. General fund operating expenses. These are our regular, recurring, for the most part, operating expenses. Current fiscal year to date and prior fiscal year to date. We look at this one every month because I like to say you're going to find a trend. I know they're a little boring to see them each time, but that's how you're going to be able to identify a positive or a trend we need to pay attention to. Of course, inflation has affected these as it has everyone else. So that's going to be the primary reason for the increases in these categories, with a few exceptions. Restricted revenues. These are revenues that are restricted for specific use. The first one listed there are our building permit fees. As we've talked about on the prior slide, we've had a slowdown in new construction, so that has slowed down our collection of our building fees and our park impact fees and our road impact fees that are here. Those are local fees, and the next slide will give you a little more detail here. When we did a budget comparison of our restricted revenues, we noted, again consistent with the economic indicators we're getting statewide, that new construction has slowed down. These three categories did not meet budget expectations because of the significance of the slowdown in those areas. Cash balances, we do show you all, this is a snapshot in time. We show you 3 fiscal years of cash balances, so we can see that they're being accumulated for capital projects to pay as we go. So that's what you have here. And then this is a continuation of that. These are our capital projects funds. You'll see here that our building fee fund is decreasing. That was somewhat planned to comply with Florida statutes, but we're going to have to look at those fees and make sure that they cover operations. Florida statutes for the building fees allow us to charge sufficient fees to cover our cost of operations. So now that the revenue's dropping, that is something we will be looking at. Our last slide is our FEMA update. Now this is a snapshot in time of November 30th. Please know that we are still moving through the FEMA process. With respect to costs, there will be additional expenses as we continue to build back and redo some of our Hurricane Ian repair. And then we're still moving through the reimbursement process. So we anticipate that coming quickly. The most of our second part of our debris hopefully will happen, I don't want to say, but near term, let's just say near term. So what we have here is we have our budgeted and allocated reserves, our operating and disaster reserves, of a total of $6.4 million. Our Hurricane Ian expenses to date have been about $9.5 million. The bulk of that are debris hauling, and that's the one that we're able to get reimbursement for the quickest. So we've gotten a little over $5 million back from FEMA and from insurance. So the remainder, that funding was actually funded from our reserves. So you'll see we have about $2 million left there, and we do, like I said, the remainder of that debris is going to come in pretty quickly. So, and then we also, which we've approved, our local government emergency bridge and loan. Again, the state has done so many good things for us to respond to Hurricane Ian. They made sure our debris money, we received 50% of that up front. Wonderful. So that's part of that $5 million. And then this emergency bridge loan is just for 1 year. It can only be used for operation, and as long as we stay within 1 year, it's interest-free. So that was a good thing. There were no fees involved with it or anything. So it was a great thing for the state to do to help us prepare, because you can see there it helps us bridge the gap until we get additional monies back from FEMA. So that's it.
You have any idea how much FEMA owes us now?
Well, we've spent out about $9.5 million. We'd like to think we'll get a lot of that. FEMA will do 75%, the state does 12%, and we do the remaining 12%, but it really is going to matter how these different expense categories for FEMA are reimbursed. So we hope to be, we're gonna push to be reimbursed for as much of that as we can. Some things, for example, the initial debris and the initial push and all the things when we were clearing the roads, FEMA will cover that at 100%. But then as we move further away and then we get into different categories of responding to the storm, they may only be at a lesser reimbursement percentage. So what we have to do, as you know, we'll be working with FEMA. We're still working on Irma. 5 years later, we'll be working through each one of those claims to make sure we maximize what we can get from FEMA.
Excellent.
Now, this compares to the last storm. I see this 9 million is less than the 12 or 14 we spent on Irma.
I don't think we,
Do you remember what we spent on Irma?
Like 8 million?
Or less.
It was around 7 to 8 million, I
Yes.
believe,
Yes.
estimated
all?
from last storm.
It was a horrible storm. Okay, thank you.
thank you. Thank you for your attention.
Lisa?
Anything else?
There wouldn't be a meeting without me talking to you, Lisa. Come on.
You know I love questions.
So, 3 of the 5 largest builders in America in the last 48 hours have already said they're gonna pull back next year by approximately 15%. That's gonna make a problem for us, yes, because affordable housing, it's not even a conversation, but property values will probably go up. So, what's your thoughts, if any? You see it as a problem? I do. I'm thinking 2025, 2026, we're gonna see people that aren't gonna be able to afford the taxes.
Well, I'd hate to make that kind of prediction. I do know that, in all the state economic reports we read, one of our strongest things is the fact that our real estate value is holding its own, which is, and going up, supply and demand.
Amen.
Yes, supply and demand, so we'll have to see. I mean, I do think we will. We've talked about it before with with respect to the building fees. We'll make sure we can operate that, and we'll be looking at those if those need to be adjusted so that we can operate, because if they bring in less, we'll figure out what we need to do over there for that operation. And the good thing about it is, I look at it from our revenue standpoint that comes in from new construction, primarily building fees, which we've already been watching, and we're going to develop a plan to deal with that, and then our impact fees. And our impact fees are for new constructions and acquisitions for new facilities. But what we do with those is we only really budget to spend what we collect. So we collect it first, like we do with the pay-as-you-go, and then we actually commit and pull forward with the project. We may have visioning down the road that would be paid by new growth, but our immediate need, the projects that you have that are funded by those park impact fees, they're in the bank. So we make sure we don't get out ahead of that and count, especially in the near term, the first 2 or 3 years. We don't count on, you know what I mean? So if it should go down, we would be looking at our capital improvement program and making sure we adjusted and prioritized our projects that were funded by those so that we ensured we moved forward as we could within the funds that we have, or if directed, alternative funding sources if they're available.
My concern is that those fees are gonna continue to go down.
I'm sure they are. I do not, personally, I do not doubt that. That's not my specialty, that industry, but I would not be surprised.
Not even your fault, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa.
We can always cut our spending.
It is.
Oh, never, don't think about cutting your spending just because the revenue comes down. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to provide a brief update on the Hurricane Ian recovery. I believe John Domer provided a handout for you all about Hurricane Ian permitting by status. And additionally, we said we would give you this update of information because most likely at the next meeting, we'll be looking for direction on how you like to move forward with waiving permit fees for Hurricane Ian. We had discussed that after the first of the year, would we be rescinding some of those and bringing back those fees depending on the type of permit it is and based on some recommendations as far as contractors' availability and timelines for materials.
Well, I did myself. So just to give you a brief update on what's going on, we had approximately between 1,200 and 1,300 properties that were considered moderately or severely impacted by the hurricane. Currently, our permits are in the 1,500 range, so we are well on our way to recovery. We have waived approximately $647,000 in building permit fees associated with permits for rebuilding and reconstruction. And as you can see on the handout, the permit volumes have really started to reach a level now where a lot of our recovery has taken hold, and we're really, I'm not going to say we're closing in on the end, but we've passed the halfway point, and we're probably about 3/4 of the way through. So,
How much is the permit to demolish a house? You charge people to, is there a permit charge for
there is a demolition fee. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but when you're tearing down a house, it's not simply just tearing it down. It depends on where it is and how you're going to remove the existing structure once it's demolished. So it's not as simple as running it over with a bulldozer and starting from scratch.
Well, we got to move along here. It's been over a year and months.
Yes, sir.
And you got your reserve funds or your amount of money you collected down near the state requirement?
We're pretty much at that point, and I don't know if we're there yet, but we're close. We're real close.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Any other? Yes, Nigel.
John, do you think that 178 demolition permits, that we're not going to see a spike in that?
I won't see a spike, but you will continue to see them. And I think that part of that goes to the ongoing discussions property owners are having with their insurance companies. And sometimes decisions just get pushed back to this point. I don't think a lot of people wanted to wait this long to demolish a structure. I think that information was just out there, and when they finally have the information that they need from their insurance company, that's when they can finally make decisions and figure out how they're going to proceed.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The other items I want to discuss is Representative Adam Botina reached out to myself and Matt Feeney as well regarding specific questions on the quadrant, Bonita Beach and US 41, and some potential funding from the Florida Department of Transportation. Additionally, requested some information regarding the city's past review of Bonita Beach Road visioning. So I'll let Matt go into further detail about the information he requested. We would like a nod, as this was not one of our legislative priorities necessarily, but I know these projects are important to the city. As we move forward, we just sort of wanted to keep council informed and then understand if that's the direction you'd like us to continue supporting, and then also whether it's to be over any other legislative priority as well, so.
Can we see it in writing? Because I want to understand, like, I'm not against a quadrant study, but I want to understand the totality of it, because there could be a number of negative effects on our autonomy if we decide to put our political eggs in a basket that we don't fully understand the parameters of. So I think understanding exactly what that looks like for us is important, because at the end of the day, if they want to figure out a way to get north and south and they decide to do it way out of the city limits, that's fine. But if they're figuring out a way that they're going to start piece by piece putting money together and try to run it up our front and back door, I don't want to help facilitate that.
The quadrant is not what you're referring to, Councilman. The quadrant is the US 41 Bonita Beach Road.
41 Beach Road only. So he's not even. So he's talking about dollars for what could be the continuous intersection dollars.
Yeah.
Okay. As far as, did he touch base with you in regards to the other side of that north and south route between?
Not at this time. This was specifically a request on the intersection of Beach and 41, and also Bonita Beach Road visioning, mostly towards the beach. I believe that's pedestrian-friendly landscaping ideas. He wanted to know what was specifically in the tool design report and the DPZ report and the funding provided. And I understand his staff is working with the Florida Department of Transportation, specifically Secretary Nanum. He's out of the country right now, so we don't have any further. Also as a courtesy, we reached out to Lee County because it is their facility within our jurisdiction, so we have kept county management aware as well of the requests.
I think so. It doesn't take away.
By the way, you're supposed to ask permission from me before
I'm
you.
not asking you a question. I'm asking her a question. And she's
Yeah,
still
but you're
talking.
supposed to go through the mayor before
All
you
right, I'm
ask
asking her
her.
a question. Are you okay with that?
Huh?
I'm asking her a question. Are you
Well,
okay with that?
yeah, but
Okay.
you're gonna do it anyways,
Yes or no?
whether I
Okay.
tell you not to or
Okay,
not.
so is
Would
it
you
yes or
hang
no?
on? Would
Okay.
you hang on?
Fat, go ahead.
Just wait till we get to that point.
What point? We're at the point of talking about what?
Exactly.
You can groan all you want. We're at the point of talking about.
Well, you
At
started
the
this out
moment.
before you didn't ask the mayor before you started
No,
talking.
I didn't, because I wasn't asking you anything.
Okay, you're supposed to, okay? Point of order. You're supposed to ask,
All right, so I'm gonna ask a question now. Are you okay with that?
I guess. Go ahead.
Does this in any way, shape, or form affect our priority? I don't mind if we get dollars for the quadrant study, but I'm not saying, but do we want to, I don't want to rank those dollars over other dollars that we're asking for from the exact same people who are asking us about this. So did we get any idea on that side of it?
We did not get any indication that I think what would be helpful, first off, is let me have Matt give you the exact information that was requested of us. And secondly, further responses we provide, if it's the direction of the council, I think it's appropriate for us to say in the response that our initial priorities remain the same. And anything over that is gravy, but our initial priorities, if that's the direction of council.
I just don't want it to be either or proposition.
So what was asked is fairly simple. It was the expenditures to date and the planned expenditures on the quadrant road, or the quadrant of that intersection. And our commitments are largely tied to the northwest quadrant where we're designing a road currently. So the expenditures to date have been $5,292,837.76. Which we shared with them. And the planned expenditures to further that road specifically, not all of the other stuff that the state has shown, is $14,542,375.
And that's not including the FDOT study that changes it to a continuous?
There's one caveat to that number, which I included in my email, which is we did commit 2 years from now $700,000, which is inclusive in that number, to cover the projected design shortfall. That I think the design was estimated at $2+ million. Don't hold me to that number, I can't remember. And the state was looking for a commitment out of the city so that it could finalize the study that it's shown. So we did commit those dollars, but that is inclusive in the $14 million number.
Perfect. Okay.
The other number I provided pertained to the work there were two visioning studies. One was more kind of function of the road, which was done by Tool Design, and then it was followed up by land use by DPZ, and that was the expenditures to date on Bonita Beach Road visioning totaled $482,863.64. So, that was the information we provided, but I think the discussion you just had is really kind of what we're looking for, because those aren't our strategic priorities, and unless you want to make them, I think we would respond, here's the information, but our priorities hold.
Because I think if we don't specifically say it like you just stated, if we're gonna get, hey, Bonita's only gonna get one thing, and this is the thing they're leaning towards, that might be it. So I don't wanna. But again, I don't wanna not get money if it's coming our way, but I don't wanna change our priorities to suit anybody else's.
We wanted to be completely transparent with the council and the public records request. Obviously, if there's a request from our representatives, any of them, state or federal, we're gonna provide the information as quickly as possible to them. And if it benefits the city in some funding purposes, we just wanted to make sure you were fully aware and that we had the direction of council to make sure that we're still pursuing our legislative priorities as first, and this is secondary.
Anything else?
Just a couple more things. In the presentation you had earlier on our CIPs, we discussed that we would be working on the parking lot here at City Hall. That work will begin in January. As you recall, we canceled the very first meeting in January 3rd. But we do have a second meeting in January. and then 2 meetings in February. Hopefully not the 2, maybe just 1 meeting in February, but we would be coming to you later on for an alternative location for those meetings. I have had contact with Chief DeWitt. He is more than happy to accommodate us at the fire district, and the equipment is already readily available to broadcast live. Additionally, I talked to him about hosting the LPA and zoning, since we broadcast those live as well, and he's more than happy to accommodate us. Additionally, any other committee meetings will be relocating to the rec center. Those do not need to be broadcast live. So we do have the equipment, and we can hold our meetings at the gym, the recreation center, but it's a decision of council, whichever you prefer. We can make either one work for you.
I make a motion we use the fire department because from a staff perspective, it seems
Second.
less intensive.
Yes.
Public can probably hear better there too. Do we need to vote on that, or
I
you
think
just want
we're
direction?
good. We have direction, so we'll move forward, and then all the meetings will be publicly noticed, so everyone will know that's the alternate location as well. So, and as soon as we can move back in here, we will, as soon as it's safe to do so. And the last thing, I just wanted to thank all of our staff, our communications department, our parks and rec department. So many people made last night a really magical moment for our kids, and so many people stepped in and helped with all different aspects of the event. So we appreciate everybody stepping in.
Thank you very much. Okay, do you have anything else to say, Jesse?
Oh, I'm good. Thanks.
Laura?
Well, I'd like to echo on Marlene's comment about the Holiday in the Park event. It was wonderful. It was just so beautiful. And thank Kathy McGrath specifically for the cookies and the cider. The kids were so excited. They would come up, may I have one? It was amazing how polite and wonderful. Just like 4-year-old, it was just so beautiful. And Mayor did a great job doing the switch.
Yeah, we turned it on. Let there be light, yes. And there was light.
But it was really a joyous and wonderful.
Yeah, it was
And
fabulous, never better.
next year, it'll be more special.
Want to ask Chris?
Oh, yeah, Chris.
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, the resiliency task force meeting will be December the 15th. This is planned to be the final meeting of the task force. It will be combined with members of all the branches who have put in a tremendous amount of work in coming up with these initiatives and the list of projects that there will be a final summary and report prepared by the county staff, and that report will be going to the county commission in February. Currently, there is a ask for public input that has been circulated throughout the county, and we will be reviewing that at the task force meeting a week from Friday. So that's one thing. The second thing is I wanted to report on behalf of Bonita Bay a concern about FPNL. Two things. We've noticed in our community that there's an increase in the number of outages and surges that is impacting a number of the homes in Bonita Bay. And we've also encountered a situation where work was not completed on a transformer, where the parts to repair the transformer were ordered and were on site, but the work was never done. As a result of Ian, the saltwater intrusion into the transformer finally caused the transformer to catch fire. 500 homes were without power. I think we all know that there's a record of outages and surges from FPNL for a number of reasons, but I would like to ask staff if they could report at the next council meeting what the city's own experience is with outages and surges as it impacts our computer systems and so forth, and to ask Greg DeWitt from the fire department if he is noticing any uptick in calls to the fire department about electrical fires caused by surges and outages. I get the feeling that there's some deferred maintenance that's been going on. We've seen this problem for a number of years, and I think it's getting to the point where, we may have to have a sit-down meeting with FPNL to discuss it. Finally, I would like to comment on Lisa's report about the increase in the number of baby boomers retiring and the number of seniors that will be living in Bonita Springs, and to note that there's a continuing expansion of the cancer and the cancer rehab center at Lee Health off Coconut Road. I'm helping them in terms of trying to raise money, but interestingly, just for statistics, if nothing else, 80% of all new cancer cases occur in people 60 years of age and older. So as we have an increasing population in Bonita Springs of people over the age of 60, I think it's a good thing that we're developing a cancer center within our own city limits. And the goal is that eventually we can have a cancer center that's big enough and well-staffed enough that hopefully people won't have to be treated in Tampa or Miami, that they can stay home and receive all the services that they need. To give you an idea, based upon national population trends, 30 million Americans are going to encounter cancer in their lives in the next 10 years. And I think we're going to have more than our fair share of it. So it's good that that cancer center is being located in Bonita Springs. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Nigel?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there was no TDC meeting. The annual meeting was this year, so nothing to report there. And I was debating on bringing this up at this meeting because it seems trivial, but it's not. We've had Ian, and bringing back that small town charm that we have had. Those of us who've lived here for more than 15 years, remember we had something called Paint Your Heart Out. And that was Bonita Bay Group, the Renaissance Group back when they were together. And we would pick out homes of senior citizens that they could not afford to necessarily maintain the way that they look. So long story short, we would pressure wash the houses, and then teams would come in and paint them. It didn't cost the city more than probably $500, but it was a great team building thing. And at one time, we were doing 15, 16 homes a year. Somebody got involved that shouldn't have. It went away because the efforts were not directed where they should have been. Suddenly, people that were working and could afford to paint their houses were getting their homes painted. That being said, I would love to proceed forward with this, and I was going to ask each member of council that over the next 6 months, and I'll get more details and work with staff on it, but each member of council would identify a family or somebody in their district that we would designate, and then be able to do 7 homes in the winter of 2024. Would anybody be opposed to doing something like that? We get it started. There's philanthropic people and like-minded people. We had no problem with volunteers. Just something that we did, and I think we should bring it back. Downside to it?
No, I think the only thing I'd like to see is instead of 7, 12.
We're not doing your house, Fred.
I'm not, I know.
But if we start small, we probably could get back to where we were, and it was just didn't cost city anything. Staff didn't have to do a lot of work. It was all volunteers, but I'd like to get it started again. So
I
if
would
council's
support
good with
that.
it. Are you good with that, Chris?
Yep, I'm good.
We're not painting your house either.
No, that's okay. Just don't ask me to get on the ladder.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Hey, Fred?
Yeah, I want to bring something up. I'm going to make a motion. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but I want staff to look into what would be the options that would be presented to the voting public on a referendum to to support Bert for Bonita Springs. I've already spoken to John McLean, the mayor of Estero, and he's not against it. He's going to call me tomorrow probably. All they would do initially is Lisa would look into what kind of costs it would be to the taxpayers. If it went on to a referendum, it's up to the taxpayers to say yay or nay. It's not us. So, and it would be to support the costs that we'd have to come up with money for Bert.
By the way, did you see this, did you see the governor's budget proposal? There's 800 million for railroad transportation. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. But that Bert is going to be costing for the right of way somewhere in the mid-70s probably.
65.
Yeah. So, anyway,
It's in this, you know, there's money in the governor's proposed budget for railroad transportation.
yeah, and this is not railroad transportation. Bert is not, unfortunately. So,
Transportation.
so all I'm making the motion is staff would investigate it. They would present back to us what the options would be. That doesn't mean we're going to go with it, but it means we have the options. But I do know that if you put a referendum on in presidential elections years, you get a bigger turnout. So the people really turn out. I don't think a countywide referendum would work, because why would somebody in Lehigh Acres vote to tax themselves to build something over here? But, so, anyway, so that's my motion. Hope I got a second.
I'll second it. I'll
Okay.
second that motion.
That's Chris Corey, okay.
I'd like to table it until we get more information.
Well, that's what staff's going to do, is get you the more information.
Well,
They won't do it unless we direct them to do it, and that takes a motion.
It doesn't take a motion, does it?
I think what Councilman Forbes is asking is some specific work to be done, pulling some financial information together. I think that it's helpful to have a consensus of council if that's the type of work we were gonna put into it, because it could get a little bit more staff involved. So if that's the direction to bring that information and do that work and then homework and bring it back, it is helpful to have a consistent vision of council to do that.
Any other comments?
I'd like to sort of see us tackle the priorities we already have and focus on getting things done, as we're doing, we're moving forward. But I don't think the staff needs right now any more to do.
Oh, that's,
Call for a vote.
Deputy Mayor Forbes.
aye.
Councilmember Purdon.
Aye.
Councilmember Carr.
No?
Mayor Steinmeier.
No.
Councilmember Fullick.
Aye.
Councilmember Corey.
Aye.
Thank you.
Anything else? I just want to thank Matt Feeney for getting that pothole fixed across the street at the entrance into Ace Hardware. Lee County reacted immediately from Matt's request, so thank you, Matt. Public comment? No public comment? Okay, I guess we're adjourned. Thank you, folks.